Welcome, everyone. I call the July 8th City Council meeting to order. This meeting was moved to the second Monday of the month due to the 4th of July holiday week. Council President Walsh has an excused absence this evening. As a reminder, we continue to have a remote aspect to our meetings, and both staff members and members of the public may be participating in tonight's meeting remotely via WebEx. The first item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance, and I invite you to join. Thank you. We have a couple of items of special business this evening. First up, I will be doing a Parks and Community Services Month Proclamation. I'm going to move down to the other mic and invite the Parks and Community Services team. Join me. Go. Okay. Welcome. Thank you for coming tonight. By the way, July 4th, wow, wow, wow. I can't say enough about the work that you did all for that. It was fantastic. Whereas Parks, Recreation, and Community Services are an integral part of our community, and whereas Parks and Recreation promote health and wellness, improving the physical and mental well-being of people who live near or recreate in parks. And whereas Parks and Community Services strengthens Issaquah's identity by providing exceptional parks, trails, green spaces, and recreation facilities that reflect and celebrate community character, history, culture, aesthetics, and landscape. And whereas Issaquah Parks and Community Services fosters social cohesiveness and creates memorable experiences throughout recreational, arts, and human services program that provide opportunities to come together, promote social equity, connect social networks, and ensure the entire community has access to these program benefits. And whereas Issaquah's Parks and Community Services provides value to the local economy through increased tourism, attraction and retention of businesses and residents, meanwhile, the department strives to provide equitable human services to add value for all Issaquah residents. And whereas Issaquah Parks and Community Services helps us to sustain and steward our natural resources by protecting open space and habitat, connecting people to nature, promoting the vital ecological function of our city-owned public land, and increasing our resilience in the face of natural disaster threats and climate change. Now, therefore, I, Mary Lee Pauley, the Mayor of the City of Issaquah, do hereby proclaim July 2024 to be Parks and Community Services Month in the City of Issaquah. And I'd like to invite Hasanthi to come and say a few words for us.
Mayor Pauley, City Council, Issaquah residents, on behalf of the Parks and Community Services Department, I want to thank you all for this recognition. My colleagues and I here tonight, as well as all of our other staff, are thankful for the opportunity to serve this great community, to provide the services, programs, events, and places for folks to gather, connect, recreate, and thrive. We were thrilled to see so many of you out at our Down Home 4th of July event last week, and we have tons more fun scheduled throughout the month. We hope you can join us at one of our concerts on the green. There are every Tuesday night through July and August on the Community Center front lawn. Tomorrow features a dance band, Rumor 6, and the concerts are at 7. We also have our farmers market every Saturday now through September at the Pickering Barn from 9 to 12. The Walla Walla onions are in, which is my favorite. The berries and stone fruit are getting rolling along, as well as many other crafts and prepared vendors. It's a great time to visit the market. We also have a lot of Green Issaquah programs going on if you are looking to volunteer and help steward our outdoor natural spaces. July 13th, Trout Unlimited will be at the Anthology Open Space. And July 20th, the Issaquah Alps Trails Club will be joining us over at Park Point. And on Wednesday, July 24th, our park ranger, Casey, will be leading a hiking 101 family-friendly hike through Traditions Plateaus, Swamp Trail, and Big Tree Trails. We're thrilled to be able to offer these great opportunities that bring our community together in meaningful ways. I also want to note that July 19th is Parks and Recreation Professionals Day. So along with this proclamation, if you see any of our staff out beautifying our parks or running our day camps or teaching swim lessons, responding to our vulnerable community members, and the other many services we happily provide, please join me in saying thank you. Thanks, team.
Can I get a picture with you all over here in front of the council? That was fun. We are going to move on to our next item of special business, which is ID 1744, and it's to do a proclamation for Disability Pride Month. And I'd like to invite the following representatives of Kindering, a nonprofit that serves children of diverse abilities and their families, to come to the lectern and join Deputy Council President Dee Michelle. Welcome, Lisa, and welcome, Roshni.
Hello, and so nice to have you with us. Many years ago, I served for 5 years on At Work's board, so disability rights are a cause very dear to my heart. So I'm really honored to be able to present this to you tonight. Whereas the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA, was passed by the U.S. Congress on July 26, 1990, to ensure the civil rights of citizens with disabilities. And whereas the ADA prevents discrimination based on disability, requires that employers provide reasonable accommodations, ensures that public accommodations meet accessibility requirements, and is recognized as one of the most important civil rights laws in history. And whereas disability pride fights against a history of stigmatization, shame, and isolation with self-determination and pride. And whereas the City of Issaquah acknowledges the barriers and challenges faced by individuals with disabilities, including societal attitudes, built and architectural barriers, lack of accessibility, discrimination, and unequal opportunities. And whereas Disability Pride Month is a time to celebrate the achievements, contributions, and resilience of individuals with disabilities in our community, and to promote inclusion, acceptance, and understanding of disability as a natural part of human diversity. And whereas we appreciate the efforts of disability rights activists, organizations, and advocates who work tirelessly to advance the rights, independence, and well-being of individuals with disabilities, and to create a more inclusive and accessible world for all. Now, therefore, it says I, but it's Mary Lou Pauley, Mayor of the City of Issaquah, does hereby proclaim the month of July 2024 to be Disability Pride Month, and in witness whereof, she has hereunto set her hand and seal of the City of Issaquah this 8th day of July 2024. And I'm very honored to give this to you. Would you like to say a few words? Here we go. Present that.
That's very, very, very wonderful to hear your. Good evening. I am Dr. Lisa Greenwald, the CEO of Kindering and a speech and language pathologist. I'm also a proud mother of a neurodiverse son with disabilities and a Kindering graduate. So I'm here today to offer a sincere thank you to all of you on behalf of Kindering for recognizing July's Disability Pride Month. You may want to know a little bit more about Kindering and why disability pride is important to us. We are a local nonprofit serving young children with disabilities. We're one of the most comprehensive neurodevelopmental centers in the Northwest. We serve thousands of children with disabilities and their families, through pediatric therapies, special education, early special education, before school age, and family supports across King and Snohomish counties. Last year, in the city of Issaquah, we served over 100 children with developmental delays and disabilities and their families. The disability pride is important to us because kindering, advancing inclusion is essential to our mission. And in addition to providing direct services, we really strive to help with at a systemic level with policy issues and use our collective voice to advance and promote cultural change. So by recognizing the importance of disability pride, as a city, you are doing just that, promoting cultural change. You are sending a clear message to our families and our people with disabilities that they are seen and celebrated, and that we as a society are committed to making the changes necessary for full inclusion of people with disabilities. For us at Kindering, working with kids every day, we know our kids deserve nothing less. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you, Mayor Polly, Councilmember Barbara, all of the council members, and all of you here celebrating with us tonight, as well as the staff who have been a part of establishing this proclamation. Thank you so much for helping us make a difference. Oh, yeah.
We're now going to move into audience comments, and this is the time that members of the public may address council in person or virtually tonight. Those who signed up in advance to make comments will be called on first. And if you are joining us virtually and you would like to make comments, can you please raise your virtual hand or send the host a chat message? If you're in the room and did not sign up, I will ask for other speakers before closing this portion of the meeting. City Clerk, has anyone signed up to speak for general audience comments tonight?
Yes.
Thank you. We have a few guidelines. If you're making comments this evening, you're invited to address the council regarding matters that are directly related to Issaquah's programs, projects, services, or events. Comments related to political campaigns are not permitted. Please direct comments to the whole council and not individuals. While this is not a question and answer session, we will contact you to follow up if needed. When you are recognized as a virtual attendee, unmute your microphone, and if you're in the room, please step up to the central lectern and press the button on the base of it to get the microphone on. State your name, address, and relationship to the city. Speak clearly and pause frequently, and please limit your comments to 5 minutes. If you're attending virtually and you do not respond after your name or phone number is called, or if your connection is lost unexpectedly, the meeting will need to proceed. If you are encouraged to rejoin the meeting if you're able. Personal attacks, obscene language, derogatory remarks, and disruptive behavior will not be permitted. Public comments, written and verbal, are an important aspect of the public process, and the city takes these comments seriously. We thank you all for taking the time to address us this evening. And I think the first one I have on the list is Larry Frank.
Yes, and Larry, I am making you a panelist now, so you should see the option to unmute and can choose to turn your video on.
Unmuted.
Sounds good.
Okay. My name is Larry Franks. I'm a 52-year resident of the city of Issaquah at 24001 Southeast 103rd Street. I'm here basically to praise the ICAP. Many of you know my motives to be selfish. My approach to climate change is picking a specific aspect of it, and that is trying to assure the survival of our salmon. I laud the progress that the city is making on the plan and urge the city to consider to further drive down greenhouse gas emissions. One of the specifics, last year I took advantage of a discount offered by a vendor at the sustainability fair in spraying for a heat pump. That dropped my personal greenhouse gas emissions significantly. I urge the city to offer more incentives like this to engage more individuals. In the meantime, keep up the canopy protection, especially over our salmon-bearing streams. Thanks for the opportunity to share this.
Thank you very much, Larry. Do we have an in the room sign-up sheet?
We do, and the next speaker is Ann Fletcher.
Come on up, Ann. That's it.
Great. Good evening. I'm Ann Fletcher, a resident and affiliated with the People for Climate Action, the Issaquah chapter. And of course, my comments tonight are about the midpoint check-in on the ICAP. When Issaquah's climate action plan was approved originally by the City Council in December of 2021, can you believe it's been that long? One city councilor said that the plan was good, but the proof of the pudding would be in getting it implemented. And another city councilor said that they wanted the community to hold them accountable to that implementation. So PCA is here today, taking this opportunity to say, we want the council to approve supportive policies, codes, and budgetary resources to ensure that the Issaquah does its part to avert the climate crisis. The midpoint checkup report shows that the staff has been working diligently to implement the ICAP actions, with 85% completed or on track. And at the same time, according to the report, we need to accelerate and do a lot of work, in quotes, with priority actions in order to reach our targets. So the plan implementation is going to need to flex to prioritize time and resources in interdepartmental problem solving to see if we can get the desired results and get on track in these next 2 years before the 5-year evaluation comes in. So some things that I think that the council can do are to emphasize buildings, energy, and transportation because they are our majority greenhouse gas emitters, just as the report says. Areas that are less impactful to our targets may need to temporarily take a back seat unless adequate resources are there to do everything. Some new policies or municipal codes may be needed for your approval. And then the second thing is that ensure that the city has the human resources to achieve these goals. Grants and creative use of consultants, interns, regional community partners, they do increase our capacity, but they also take sustainability staff time to manage. So when budget work is being done, the council should strive for optimum resources to improve our ICAP implementation. And I have a few more thoughts about how to be more impactful. One is buildings and energy, our largest greenhouse gas emitter, especially our existing buildings, are a tough nut to crack. But if we could prepare now for some important future year actions that we have in the plan, like electrification outreach, incentives, and benchmarking, they may be the key to better progress. Then second, transportation and land use, our second largest greenhouse emitter. Let's show how public works and sustainability can best engage together around climate-related transportation targets in both the ICAP and the Master Mobility Plan. Title 18 and 16. PCA's understanding was that there are still some climate-related Title 18 revisions that were deferred until the comp plan was done, and possibly maybe some more Title 16 building code updates. And last, the city administration structures. We have a wonderful staff, a wonderful city, and wonderful departments. Portland, Oregon met their emission reduction targets 10 years ago, in part by prioritizing and incorporating sustainability with the other key departments through a structured collaboration design. Let's find more ways to integrate the ICAP among the relevant departments to get the strongest initiatives and solutions. Climate issues are big, complicated, and darn tough. If they weren't, well, people would have figured out already how to resolve them. So, while acknowledging our disappointment with our early trajectory towards our targets, let's use this opportunity to renew our efforts in all of the areas that I talked about. And this is very possible to do. The probability of it happening, though, will depend on how people respond to the messages and collaborate boldly.
And if you want to, can you come just back for 1 second and talk about an event? Just mention the date of an event you're having that's coming up, PCA.
Yes, on July 26th, that's a Friday at 6 o'clock in Confluence Park, we have People for Climate Action's 5th anniversary. Can't believe it. And have Mary Lou Polly to thank for that idea to get us started. And Mary Lou and Victoria, who spoke at that time, are going to be here, going to come and speak at the event. And it's a potluck picnic. You're all invited, but elected people don't have to bring any food.
Thank you, Ann. I think that's an important comment, just because we know that the government can do some stuff, but we really have to get the community to jump on board with us as well.
Absolutely.
So thank you for planning that event.
And let other people know about it. Anyone that's interested can come.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else signed up to speak?
Yes, we have another virtual caller with the number 206-300. Going to make you a panelist now. You should be able to, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you on my end.
This is Steve.
We can hear you, Steve.
This is Steve. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir, we can.
Okay. This is Steve Pereira. I've been living in Issaquah for about 16 years and wanted to share a couple thoughts. I'll have you keep me honest on the time clock. So thank you for that in advance. A couple thoughts I wanted to share. One, channeling my former Issaquah Library Board duties. The libraries serve as a good place to act as a cooling station for anybody who needs to act and stay cool. So just wanted to promote the library for that function. Second item, I recently listened to the presentation on the Metroplex past presentation, and two thoughts I wanted to share. One was on form, and that's that I didn't hear as the presenter went through the slides, I didn't hear a lot of the talk about what the numbers and the data were. They would have had to be online watching the presentation to get the data and the numbers. I would like to see, since some of us listen via phone but not watch the presentation, to talk more to the data and the facts. And I suppose that could probably carry through to any presentation. The second items were on substance. I would have liked to see more data, specifically on the number of rides that are used to get into and from transit sites and what the cost of ride share is per ride that's provided. Third is a process item. When you go to the city council meeting for a lot of the presentations, there's a presentation made and then public comment is provided, or opportunities provided after city council questions. But when you go to other city board and commissions, there's not an opportunity to comment after the presentation is made by staff, and I'd like to see that opportunity shared so that people can have a better idea of what to comment and how to focus their comment on questions throughout the life cycle. Fourth item, I guess, is a few times now I've heard before city council, this section is called audience comments instead of public comments. I'd like to see that changed. The audience is just somebody who comes to watch what's happening, not participate in our democracy, and we're losing that chance to participate in democratic participation by just having it segued and narrowed to audience comments. For our democracy to work, people need to be invited into the process and make substantive comment and have that comment felt is listened to and acted upon. I'm kind of becoming of the opinion that it doesn't really matter what I have to say or do because I'm just an audience comments. It's a process space, but it's not really inviting people into the public square. Kind of going along with that thought is the recent change in only allowing the public comment period for direct city council agenda items, and I would like to see that changed again for our democracy to work. Democracy is not just a matter of who shows up to vote or to vote for elected representatives, but it's a chance to, indeed, a requirement to engage in the public square process. We're limiting that public square where the members of city council and the mayor can make presentation after presentation for things that you feel is important, but it robs us, the citizens of agency, because we don't have the same agency that you do. We have a lesser agency to speak for our mind, to engage in the public square, I don't know how else to make that case, but the public square is being narrowed and government is for the few, not for the many. It's something that gets done or gets happen. So that whole process needs to change. I'm tired of tilting at this horse and not seeming to get anything made. But if you want to engage the public, you need to engage the process of what that happens. I guess I'll take maybe my last little bit of time to talk about the greenhouse gas emissions. I think the city has indeed committed some measurable resources for this to happen, but we need to focus more on what we can do legislatively and make requirements to meet our greenhouse gases. It's not something the city can do. It's something I agree that the public, has got to be engaged in doing. So while I commend ICAP and the Citizens Climate Action, it's something legislative we need to do to have better greenhouse gas standards for building code and for zoning and preservation of our natural resources to mitigate those resources. I think I will end it there. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Steve.
And for those who get involved in this.
Thank you, Steve. There was a lot in there, but I wonder if I can just get our city clerk to do answer the audience public comment question after we finish with this, because I believe that is a pretty easy answer that we could give tonight. Is there anybody else that has indicated a desire to speak?
No.
Mr. Kapler, would you like to come up?
Hit the button there. Thank you. David Kapler, 255 Southeast Andrews Street. On the issue of climate, when we got involved, and I got involved in the city, we called it global warming. And it was the origin of the villages. The Dallas and Issaquah Highlands both came out of concern about climate and how we could more efficiently use the land and how we could retain a lot of vegetation, protection for the creeks, and all of those same kinds of things our great staff is working on now and in planning and the rest. But I'm thankful for the leadership the city has taken for decades now on this topic. And I'm just amazed at the product that staff has come up with and the work they're putting into it and the support they're getting from the administration and the council. So keep it up, and I hope I see you at the picnic here near the end of the month. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. Is there anybody else online, City Clerk, that may want to comment?
We do have one other member of the public with us, but I don't see they're indicating a desire to speak at this time.
Thank you. I wonder if you could take a minute and explain why during the council meetings we have audience comment versus public comment.
It is in our municipal code as one of the city council's order of business, and it's been the traditional way we've referred to public comments that are taken here. But as we know during our new hybrid meetings that aren't so new anymore, that term really encompasses anyone who's physically here or with us virtually to make comments, and it is not restricted. And also just to clarify that members of the public are able to address the city council on any topic provided it relates to a city program, project, service, or event. So the comments don't need to be restricted to an item on the agenda.
Thank you very much for that clarification. And thanks to everyone who took time to join us tonight. We heard several community members talk about this mid-period ICAP review that's impacts on salmon and survivability, progress we've made to date and potential acceleration, and gratitude for the effort that collectively the administration and the council have put on, and the staff have put on this. We also had various comments on city processes, the ways the public can engage, some questions on the Metroflex data, which I put a note down that maybe there's we can follow up on that with answering some of the questions that were mentioned here. And I just appreciate that you all spent this nice, lovely summer night with us and took your time to think about what you were going to say. So very thoughtful. Thank you very much. Anytime individuals, businesses, residents would like to submit something to the council, you can do it by an email at citycouncil@issaquahwa.gov. So our next item of business is the consent calendar, and I do not have any remarks on the consent calendar. I'm looking around to see if committee chairs do, and I'm seeing not. Okay. The consent calendar was distributed to council in advance, and if authorized, the items on the consent calendar will be considered together and approved by one motion. Have the payables and payroll been reviewed?
They have.
Thank you. Does any council member desire to remove any item from the consent calendar and consider it under regular business? Not seeing any indication. Would someone care to make a motion?
Thank you, Mayor Pauley. I move that we accept the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Thanks. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any council discussion? Not seeing an indication. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That passes unanimously with a 6-0 vote. We're now going to move into the regular business items this evening, which there are none, because the two items for you are both informational updates. So let's head into committee and regional reports, and we'll start with Councilmember Joe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. On June 27th, Cascade Water Alliance celebrated its 25th anniversary. I'd like to thank Dave Kapler for all the work that he did to get Issaquah to take up the mantle of being a member of Cascade Water Alliance. And it was a great celebration. We had the opportunity to talk with Cascade staff and see elected officials that we don't often get to see face to face as we talked about water issues. I'd like to thank Councilmember Barbara DiMichele and Public Works Director Emily Moon for also attending and representing Issaquah. On July 24th, the Cascade Water Alliance will be holding its regular board meeting at 3:30 in the afternoon. And the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee will be meeting on the 18th of July. And we're welcoming a new member that's replacing our Village Theater representative that had to cycle off. So it should be an exciting meeting for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Hall.
Thank you. I had such a long report last time, so today I'll just say that the Eastside Fire and Rescue Board of Directors next meets this coming Thursday at 4 p.m. at our headquarters on Newport Way Northwest, and that concludes my report.
Great. Thank you. Councilmember Hunt.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have 4 upcoming meetings. The first one is that tomorrow, July 9th, there will be a meeting of the City Council Planning, Development, and Environment Committee. It will start at 7 p.m. Because there will be a meeting before that of a different council committee. And we have 3 items. The first is COM 0019, which is Lakeside Transfer of Development Rights. Second item will be COM 0061, Annual Amendments to Title 18 and Title 3, which are parts of our municipal code. And then COM 0067, which is Housing and Parking Analysis Scope of Work discussion. There will be a meeting of the Kokanee Interlocal Agreement Management Working Group at 1 p.m. on July 15th. This is an annual meeting where we discuss how we can best support kokanee, which are special kind of salmon in Lake Sammamish. And then additionally, there will be a meeting of the K4C King County Climate Working Group elected official work session on July 16th at 3 p.m. This will be in person in Seattle. And then the last upcoming meeting is the RIA 8 Salmon Recovery Council meeting on July 18th. This is the name of our watershed, and the Salmon Recovery Council for this meeting will be meeting in person, and we are visiting a Bear Creek restoration project in Redmond. So a couple times a year or once a year, we get to see restoration projects that the Salmon Recovery Council has funded, and this will be one of those times, so it should be exciting. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Councilmember Ray.
Thank you, Mayor Pauly. The City Council Mobility and Infrastructure Committee is meeting tomorrow at 6:30 as the first committee meeting of the doubleheader. We have one item on the agenda. It's COM 0018, Solid Waste Contract Administrative Fee. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Councilmember Martz.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First up, the Sound Cities Association Public Issues Committee will be meeting Wednesday, July 10th at 7 p.m. It's an online meeting. Some of the topics include 2025 solid waste rates discussion, a discussion on nuclear radiation health effects related to Washington State having a number of nuclear byproduct storage as well as armament and nuclear weapon storage. Regional alignment on asylee crisis discussion continues. So that will be that meeting. I want to point out that SCA is having a summer social on Wednesday, July 24th from 5:30 to 8 p.m. here at the Pickering Barn. As in my 14 years on PIC, I think it's the first time that it's occurred here in Issaquah. So we'll be playing host to a lot of brain trust of wonderful elected officials that are associated with SCA. So hopefully we'll be good hosts for that event and support it well. The Services, Safety, and Parks Committee did meet on June 25th at 6:30 p.m. here in Council Chambers. We had a presentation on the Park System Plan update. Some of the feedback from us on the committee was that we were pleased with the amount of public engagement in the plan, pleased maintained emphasis on trail connections, development of playing fields so they can be used for regional tournaments, brings ancillary economic benefit to the community, was brought up. Yours truly would like to see more equity in the park system, i.e. a cricket pitch. There have been members of the South Asian community who have been asking for a permanent cricket pitch for a long time. So I asked Jeff Watling what it would take to consider having a permanent cricket pitch. Then the second item that we had was on credit card fee cost recovery. Long, complicated, long path to little house, as a former city director used to say. We recommended support of option number 1, which is whereby customers pay credit card fees directly. This was the most transparent and most fair because it allowed people who wanted to pay with cash or check to not have to pay the fee. This concludes my report.
Thank you. Deputy Council President DiMichele.
Thank you. On June the 25th, the Eastside Human Services Forum held its third forum of the year. We had 85 people. It was an in-person forum, and the topic was how to integrate diversity, equity, and inclusion more closely into human services services, yes. So, I was a very good event. Lamont Green, University of Washington professor, led the discussion, did an excellent job, and we had a panel that involved representative from the state's DSHS and Paula Wally from Friends of Youth, and also a really good and informative discussion, and then breakout sessions that I think went very well. So all in all, it was a very successful day. Eastside Transportation Partnership will hold its meeting, July meeting, this Friday remotely, and then we will be canceling the August meeting. And Regional Transit Committee is meeting a week from Wednesday, and the topic at that will be adoption of a rapid ride strategic plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Council President. The Council President has an excused absence today, so no report. For the Mayor's report, there will be no executive session this evening. I'm going to have to talk about that 4th of July event again. I just have to. I am thrilled to report on the incredible success of our 4th of July parade and celebration this past Thursday. This event was planned and put on by our outstanding Parks and Community Services Department. This year's festivities were truly a testament to our community spirit and what makes Issaquah a wonderful place to live, work, and play. Parade was absolutely wonderful. It was heartwarming to see so many families and neighbors lining the streets, waving flags, and sharing the joy of the day. Following the parade, the celebration continued on the community center lawn with the Field of Fun, hosting an array of activities, food, and entertainment. The bouncy houses and obstacle courses were a particular highlight, bringing smiles and laughter to our youngest residents. I want to extend my deepest gratitude to the Parks and Community Services team for their tireless effort in planning and executing this event. Their hard work and meticulous attention to detail ensured an unforgettable experience. I also want to thank all of our volunteer sponsors and our police department for the crucial support we need from them in making this day safe and enjoyable for all. So thank you all for participating and making this celebration one for the books. I look forward to many more successful ones in the future. There are a couple of upcoming events I'll talk about. There's a Chalk Art Festival. This is Issaquah's annual Chalk Art Festival. It will take place on Tuesday, July 23rd. From 12 to 4 p.m. on the community center lawn, all participating chalk artists will receive free sidewalk chalk. Bring a friend and your creativity and come to help celebrate summer. For more details, it's on our website at issaquah.gov. And even if you're not an artist, walking after they have marked up the sidewalks is really something awesome to see. Seattle Shakespeare is presenting The Two Gentlemen of Verona on Thursday, July 25th at 7 p.m. on the Issaquah Community Center lawn. Come and join this free outdoor performance. No tickets or RSVP needed. And to learn more, you can go to our website. The United Communities of Laos Summer Festival is happening on Saturday, July 27th at the Lake Sammamish State Park. This is the 3rd annual festival. This event features live music, cultural performances, a fashion show, vendors with Laotian food and drink, and vendors selling traditional clothing and merchandise. This event is free and open to the public through an annual or one-day. No annual or one-day pass is needed for vehicle access to the park. Is free and open to the public, though you do have to get your one-day pass for the park. And again, more information on our website. And our annual Concerts on the Green series has started up, and it's rocking. You heard about that when Hasanthi spoke today. Every summer, Concerts on the Green presents free, family-friendly concerts in a beautiful outdoor setting on the Issaquah Community Center. Green on Tuesday evenings. And the last item is the Gas Station Blues. It's a series that showcases distinguished blues musicians every Thursday evening from 7 to 9 p.m. at the historic Old Town Shell Station. Join us for this free music celebration with friends. And again, lots more information on the website. That concludes the mayor's report. And so now we'll move into our informational items. We have 2 on our agenda this evening. First one is ID 1571. It's an informational update. Issaquah's Climate Action Plan Midpoint Check-In. And I'd like to invite Sustainability Manager Stacey Van McKinstry to the podium. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor Polly, Deputy Council Michelle, and members of the council. My name is Stacey Van McKinstry. I'm the city's sustainability manager, and I'm joined tonight by David Reedy, our sustainability coordinator, and online by Nick Horn, our Civic Spark fellow. The Issaquah Climate Action Plan requires that we, quote, City Council conduct a midpoint review by June 30th, 2024 to ensure we are on track and adjust the plan if needed. This check-in is intended to fulfill the requirements of the ICAP Today, we're going to provide a detailed summary of where we are with implementing the ICAP and talk about what is next. While only our sustainability team is presenting tonight, I do want to note that this presentation is really meant to represent the work across the departments that are helping support the Climate Action Plan. First tonight, we're going to provide you with a high-level summary of how we are doing. We are then going to talk about our approach to implementation of the ICAP and the progress that we're making on the 54 actions identified in the plan. We won't go through every single action. We want you to come away from this presentation with an understanding of some of the great projects and programs that are underway. We're then going to zoom out and look at how our actions within the plan are translating to overall progress on the targets identified in the ICAP. From there, we'll talk about our needs to accelerate progress and our plan for implementation over the coming years. Before jumping into progress on the plan, we wanted to first provide a brief refresher on the ICAP and a recognition of this important plan. The ICAP was the first climate action plan developed by the city and adopted by council in December of 2021. There was a 9-month process that took place in advance that really engaged the community. It was developed during COVID and completely through virtual engagements where staff and the consulting team undertook many community listening sessions, held focus groups with environmental groups and businesses, and worked to really balance the interests and needs of a variety of voices from our community. This plan is really a great achievement for our city and provides directions for actions to be taken to help us achieve the bold and ambitious target. The actions within the plan include programs, policies, and projects that are intended to put us on a path to reach our target. These actions cannot be taken by one entity alone. They are really intended to call upon the city, our residents, our businesses, and the greater community to take action and make significant changes to both operations and changing our behavior in order to meet the target. The plan sets targets across a variety of focus areas, including targets for greenhouse gas reductions, energy efficiency, and waste diversion, a few. We have some near-term timelines to track progress towards those targets, as well as longer-term timelines, some that look out as 25 years. Some of those programs we're implementing to help with progress towards targets will take time to get underway and additional time to see the results of those programs. While we need urgent action, we also need to recognize the complexity of this work that we are undertaking, and in some cases that time is needed to see a shift in behavior and the impact. So first, let's start with a brief snapshot of how we are doing. And then we are going to dive in deeper into each of these areas. So when it comes to the actions within the ICAP, we are doing well. We have a majority of our actions that are underway, or many that are complete. In terms of our targets, we are making progress towards some of these targets. For others, our current progress is not on track to where we anticipate we will meet the target. And finally, we've secured a lot of funding for some areas of implementation, but in some cases, as noted above, that isn't necessarily translating into progress across all targets. We are working to understand those disconnects and where additional investment is needed. We do anticipate we'll need additional resources to improve the areas that have the greatest impact towards our target. When I started in December of 2021, I was provided this community-driven plan that laid out a roadmap for implementation. With minimal capacity and resources, the approach to implementation centered around identifying where there are already existing partnerships in place that we could really take advantage of to develop or expand upon programs and projects, investing in near-term actions that could provide us with some quick wins, and then also looking at longer-term actions where we could take some initial steps to get those programs in place and have greater impact in the long run. During the first year, we had a fairly small budget for ICAP implementation, but we pursued additional funds through council requests as well as grant opportunities. In year 2, we were able to bring on additional staff, student interns, and a fellow. We have expanded our work into municipal operations and invested in fostering relationships across our departments and further developing ownership for ICAP implementation throughout. Let's turn to where we are now. This is a brief snapshot of where we are in terms of making progress on overarching targets. We will dig deeper into the focus areas as well as project and program examples in a moment. As with many data projects, we are dealing with a lag in data availability to measure our greenhouse gas emissions. We talked about this back in January when we presented on our emission inventory. Our most recent inventory was completed just this year, and it looked back at our 2022 emissions, meaning that much of our recent data or most current data does not necessarily reflect the last year and a half of program projects or policies. If we look at where our emissions were in 2022, we are trending down based on that inventory. However, given the recent adoption of the plan, just a year or a few months before some of that data was collected, as we discussed with you back in January, that trend is likely based on a lot of the state policies for buildings, as well as cleaner requirements for our utilities. In addition, it was likely that in 2022, we are still seeing a number of folks working remotely, which likely represents a trend downward in our transportation emissions. In a few minutes, we'll be turning to looking at these trends in more detail and whether they're trending in the right direction fast enough. So digging a little bit further into our inventory, on this slide, we can see a breakdown of where our emissions are coming from. As we presented back in January, our greatest community-wide emissions are represented through buildings and energy use, as shown in the orange, and secondly, with our transportation as shown. Again, these emissions were from 2022, but our previous inventories prior to 2022 showed similar trends in terms of where our greatest emissions were. And therefore, the ICAP represents the actions primarily in these areas. Next, turning to where we have influence. This graph represents what's called a wedge analysis.
Stacey, let's take Councilmember Mert's question.
Oh, yes, sorry.
Can you go back to two slides? One more slide, please.
Yeah.
So on this slide, so the bars are absolute and the dotted line are per capita, is that correct?
That is correct.
So as I look at 2022 versus 2019, it's interesting to me that transportation is the same, but built environment is less. Given that 2022 is a COVID year, that's kind of the exact opposite of how I would have guessed that those numbers would tease out. Is there any thought on why build environment was so much better in 2022 and transportation? I mean, there were less cars on the road in 2022.
Right, yeah. Most of that, and I'll have David help provide some more detail in a moment, but most of that is likely from the building and energy codes at the state level, as well as the utility requirements for cleaner energy sources. When we dig in a little bit deeper in a future slide into that transportation trend, we will see it is reduced, and we do think that is a like from.
So between 2019 and 2022, we saw that much of a reduction from built environment just from code changes, because there was a huge legacy amount of built that did not necessarily change, right? Like a pretty small fraction actually changed in those 3 years.
Yeah, that's our assumption, as well as through CETA, the Clean Energy Transformation Act, and the cleanup of PSE's energies.
We'll make sure David provides you deeper details when he's up. He was trying to jump up and knock her out of the way already.
We are going to dig into those trends in a little bit more, and
Great.
we can provide some more detail.
All right, just at a high level, I just wanted to understand what this slide was saying to me.
Okay.
Thank you.
And Councilmember Joe, too, has a question.
Thank you. On slide 7, where we are emissions, you have process and fugitive emissions. Did they commit a crime and they're escaping the city, or could you explain that a little bit more for those of us that do not work in the field?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we talked a little bit about these during the emissions report back in January, but some of those are emissions that escape through transmission of energy, for example. and refrigerants is another one. And some of those, as you can see, back to 2012, 2007, those were not captured in previous inventories. So we do see that the methodology for our inventories changes.
Okay, and just so I carry the information over correctly, on slide 8 is the 5% refrigerants that's in the pie graph the same as the fugitive emissions in the prior slide? Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other council members? Stacy, keep going.
So returning back to our wedge analysis, this is a more commonly now shown in inventories, which is really meant to be representative of where we have influence. So if we look at the black dash line up above, that is showing a business as usual emission scenario. Where our targets are the red dashed line down on the bottom. The solid colors are showing where that federal and state, and in some cases regional policies can help us with emissions reduction. But in the dotted or shaded area is where really local and regional action has the most influence. Those blue and green shaded or dotted areas are showing buildings and transportation, including energy efficiency, decarbonization, reduced vehicle mile travel, and transitioning to electric vehicles. These are not meant to be, these wedge analyses are not meant to be prescriptive in the work that we do, but are meant to be a guiding force to help us set some priorities for our work. And we'll revisit this later this evening as we look at the work that we plan to do over the next couple of years. So now digging into our actions and where we are in terms of implementing the ICAP. As mentioned earlier, as of now, we are at about 85% of our actions that are either complete or underway. We have included a company report in the agenda packet that provides a lot more details on each of those actions. Some of the areas that we're starting to see some delays are around materials and consumption, some delays in natural systems actions, and community resilience. Nick's going to talk in a few moments about a little bit more detail on some of those action areas and highlight why we may be seeing some of those delays. Now turning to funding that's supporting implementation of the actions. This graph is showing a breakdown of our funding. A majority of funding to the Sustainability Fund is coming from city budget as well as state grant. Also in the company report, we provide a detailed breakdown of those funding sources. Much of our recent state funding is coming from the Climate Commitment Act. And again, you can see a breakdown of CCA funding that we've secured in that report. So how are we allocating our funding across the different focus areas of the climate plan? I do want to note that what we're presenting tonight only represents the funds that the sustainability team manages. A lot of our funding is going towards building and energy, overarching actions, and then also we are investing in community resilience and well-being. So again, this is not representing all of the funding that's coming to the city to support ICAP implementation, only the funds that are appropriate. So next we're going to dig into each of the actions by focus area, and I'm going to hand it over to Nick, who is going to walk us through each of those areas. Yes.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Hang on one second, Nick. City Administrator is asking Stacy to add a few more thoughts.
Great. There was just a question to explain Civic Spark Fellow, and I will start. Nick can add to that. So Civic Spark is a program similar. It's actually now a program part of AmeriCorps, but it is typically an 11-month position, full-time position. Nick joined us in January. We had a Civic Spark Fellow that was here earlier in the year. She was called back to the Navy. So we were very lucky to bring on Nick in January, and Nick will be with us through August. So Nick's been working on a variety of projects, some of which they'll be presenting on tonight.
You're on, Nick.
All right, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Very well, yeah.
Great. Apologies, I can't be there in person. I'm currently sick with COVID, so I had to stay home, but I'm glad to be here to present to you all. So here we have a snapshot of action implementation for our overarching actions. For this area, you can see that many of our actions are complete, meaning the action was launched and is done or is ongoing, or they're on track for implementation. All right. One more. Okay. All right. I can read out the next slide.
Okay.
That helps. So in the next slide, we are have a couple project highlights from the focus area. First, our greenhouse gas inventory was completed for 2022. This included both a community-wide inventory and our first municipal operations inventory. It was the first inventory since the development of the ICAP. Second, we are electrifying our fleet. Since ICAP adoption, we have installed fleet charging, with more and more coming this year. Procured EVs and have more EVs on order. Third, we have continued to engage on and build our regional partnerships. Most notable is the launch of our new formal partnership with the East Side cities that is collaboratively applying for grants, conducting research, and running programs. All right, this slide provides us with a snapshot of our buildings and energy actions. We have a mix of progress for these actions, with most complete or on track. Some of these actions are long-term initiatives that take substantial funding, capacity, or political will, which is why there may be some delays. Okay. Here are a few project highlights from this focus area. First, we're partnering with Puget Sound Energy on a community solar project on the community center that will be installed in the fall of 2024. Thank you, Council, for your approval of this project. All shares will go to low-income community members, reducing their monthly electric bills. Second, we continue to manage our energy efficiency and electrification programs for large buildings and residential homes through our Clean Buildings Incentive Program and Heat Pump campaign run through the Energy Smart East Side. Okay. This slide provides a snapshot of progress on actions under the transportation and land use category. Many of these actions called for the updates through the Title 18 process, which were completed with the adoption of the new code last year. Other actions related to the plan implementation and EV charging, which are underway and are long-term processes. Here are a few project highlights from this focus area. There are updates to the land use code included requirements around sustainable buildings and a focus on environmental stewardship. The city is piloting alternatives for single occupancy vehicle trips, such as MetroFlex, and the city continues to advocate for improved transit and light rail service. All right. This slide provides a snapshot on where we are with the materials and consumption category. Some of these actions are delayed or not yet started due to capacity constraints. With the hiring of Sam Tarvin as our solid waste analyst this spring, we have more capacity and we are looking forward to advancing and expanding several initiatives this year. A few project highlights here. First, the new Recology contract brings many environmental benefits to the city, including a dedicated zero waste specialist who is working with commercial and multifamily buildings to increase waste diversion, including introducing recycling and composting. Second, we have a program dedicated to waste diversion in schools, working with ISD schools within the city boundaries to bring back recycling, composting, and reusable utensils, right-size waste receptacles, and educate students on waste diversion. The natural systems and water resources category, many of these actions relate to work happening within CPD and public works and focus on plan implementation. Many of the actions do not directly relate to our target in this category for increased tree canopy. A few projects to highlight include the updates to the Title 18 Land Use Code to focus on tree preservation and enhancements and continued natural systems plan implementation. For our community resilience and well-being focus area, we have a mix of progress on actions as many of these are long-term projects or planning around new emergency responses and protecting vulnerable populations. Two projects to highlight in this category include, first, completion of our climate vulnerability assessment, which looks at our community's risk to climate impacts and can be used to inform projects and planning across the city. Second, the Resilience Hub project, where we are working with partners across the city to develop a network of services for, before, during, and after a climate disaster. I'll now hand it over to David to talk about progress towards our ICAP targets. Thank you.
All right. Thank you all very much for having us. Ooh.
Before you jump in, I think we have a
Yes.
question. Deputy Council President?
A couple of questions on the transportation and partnership with the school district. I noticed that they recently got a grant to buy, I think, 6 electric buses. And so did we play a role in that? Are we partnering with them on those kinds of transportation efforts as well?
Yeah, we did not directly play a role. We have been offering our support for grant opportunities, and then we will be starting to engage with them in a conversation about shared charging. It looks like they're going to be putting the charging for those buses up in the Mammoth just because of the ease for serving that area with the electric buses, but we're hoping to expand that down here and look at some partnerships for charging.
Can I add to that too?
Yeah.
PSC used us to make an introduction to the school district as well, to try and talk about not only the purchasing, but the electrification of the grid. And we got the people connected together that are going to do it, but the focus right now is on the bond. And so this is going to get pushed till later in the fall.
And then I had a second question, and that's about the resilience hubs. And I think the last time that you came to talk to us, you had started on at least 2 of those hubs. Are those still going forward? And again, how do people contact you to let you know that they'd like to be a resilience hub?
Yes, so I can speak to that. To contact us, I can connect with you following this meeting. The project is being co-managed by myself and Jared Schneider, our emergency manager, so happy to discuss that. We are next week actually wrapping up kind of the first phase of what we're calling the Resilience Hub project, which is really that goal setting up kind of what we're really trying to do here in Issaquah for the Resilience Hub project. And so the plan is to roll out our resilience hubs or the sites that we want to start with resilience hubs this fall. And so we're kind of in the final process of selecting those initial sites, and then also we're more than happy to talk about additional sites as well.
Not seeing any other questions. Go ahead, David.
All right. So what we've covered so far has focused on, and here we go. So what we've covered so far has focused on implementation of the 54 actions in the Climate Action Plan. Now we're going to zoom back out and look at our targets under each of those focus areas. Note that plan implementation is only 2.5 years underway, and most of our data on targets is from the 2022 greenhouse gas inventory. There is a lag time between our actions and when we can measure impact. Our next greenhouse gas inventory will be conducted in 2025 to cover 2024, or about 2.5 years of plan implementation. In the next slides, I will cover top-line messaging on progress, highlight some of the data used to track progress, and provide a staff summary of what we think is needed to accelerate progress. So for this section, I'll be sharing a few top-line takeaways for targets under each focus area before diving into some of the data that is supporting our takeaways. For our overarching climate targets, emissions are decreasing, but our current trends are not on track for us to reach our 2030 targets. For buildings and energy use and fossil fuel use is increasing, but as did our population and our building stock. However, we did achieve one of our targets for 100% renewable electricity for city buildings, and we did that 1 year early than the Climate Action Plan. For transportation and land use, we are close to achieving our non-drive alone mode share target, and our vehicle miles traveled target progress is decreasing. However, we do anticipate some of those numbers representing impacts of earlier COVID-19 response. We'll have a better idea of the new norm with our 2024 inventory. So under the overarching climate actions area, our target focuses on community-wide greenhouse gas emissions reduction. So the graph on the screen shows our greenhouse gas emissions from our completed inventories in green and shows our targets in black for 2030, 2040, and 2050. These columns in black represent the percent decreases listed in the targets using 2007 as our baseline year. One thing you might notice is that we are finally going in the right direction with our 2022 inventory, as we see our community-wide greenhouse gas emissions going down in 2022. This is likely from state policies, utility requirements, and utility fuel mix changes. And just to provide a little bit more context for Councilmember Mart's earlier question, our transportation emissions between 2019 and 2022 decreased 13%, mainly due to electrification of vehicles and also decreases in vehicle miles traveled, which you'll see. And then our building energy use emissions decreased 16%. So since that's a bigger share of the overall pie, that decrease kind of appears bigger on that graph, but the transportation emissions did also decrease between 2019 and 2022. And there is more detail on that in the 2022 greenhouse gas inventory report that's on the website. So if we change how we look at the previous graph, we can extrapolate out and show how much our emissions would decrease if we kept the trend we saw in 2022. If we were to continue the downward trend we have been on between 2019 and 2022, we would get close but miss our 2030 target. In this graph, the solid green line represents the continuation of our greenhouse gas reduction trend from 2022, while the dashed black line is the greenhouse gas reduction trend we need to see in order to meet our 2030 target. Oop. I think that got put in the wrong spot. So for buildings and energy, our targets focus on reducing energy use overall, reducing greenhouse gas emissions from new buildings, reducing fossil fuel use in our buildings, and realizing 100% renewable energy for municipal buildings. All of these targets represent different pieces of the puzzle required to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from the built environment. This graph specifically looks at how we can measure one of these targets, reducing fossil fuel use, which is natural gas, propane, oil, etc., in our built environment. Looking at the comparison between fossil fuel use in 2017 to 2022, our fossil fuel use actually is increasing overall. In order to meet our 2030 and 2050 targets for fossil fuel reduction, represented in shades of gray, we will need to reverse this trend. Under our transportation and land use focus area, the targets focus on increasing non-drive alone mode share and decreasing vehicle miles traveled. This graph shows our vehicle miles traveled trends between 2017 and 2022. When we think about vehicle miles traveled, the more folks driving gas or diesel-powered vehicles, the more greenhouse gas emissions in the transportation sector in our community. One immediate takeaway with this graph is that the vast majority of vehicle miles traveled in our community is from light-duty vehicles, like passenger cars. While the emissions per mile can be higher with, say, a heavy-duty vehicle versus a light-duty vehicle, the majority of emissions from vehicles use remains from light-duty cars. While we are seeing a downward trend for VMT between 2019 and 2022, we anticipate this is likely artificially low due to carryover impacts from COVID-19, work from home, and reduced activity. Here we can see the 2030 targets for reduced VMT in shades of gray. And while we are trending downward, our 2024 inventory will be telling of whether that trend continues or turns around based on fewer COVID-19 restrictions. Okay, so I've walked through a lot of data, and it's important to debrief a bit on what this data tells us. First, across all three focus areas, we need continued and, in cases, accelerated investment in actions that will help us achieve those targets. We need to continue to lead by example in the actions by departments and in the physical assets of our city, our facilities, and our vehicles. Also, we need to continue to advocate beyond our city borders for what will be needed to achieve our targets, because we will not reach our targets alone and without complementary actions at the county, state, utility, and federal level. Okay, moving on to the next three focus areas. For materials and consumption, waste diversion rates are trending in the wrong direction, and we are off track to achieve our waste reduction goals. As a note, there are two different ways the same waste reduction goals are framed in the Climate Action Plan, which would lead to different target outcomes. So staff plan on addressing this issue during the next update. For natural systems and water resources, we are making progress, and staff believe we are on track for our 2035 tree canopy goals. For community resilience and well-being, this target is very difficult to track and measure, and we are working with many city departments to deal with that. However, we do have many projects working toward the target under this focus area. So, diving back into the data. Starting with the materials and consumption first, you will note between 2020 and 2023, our waste diversion rates, the total diversion is seen in the last row of the table, have been going in the wrong direction, and we need to seriously reverse this trend in order to reach our targets for 2030 and 2050, which are seen in the last two columns of this table. Again, there is a slight difference in framing of this target in the Climate Action Plan, which staff will address. As a note, during the years covered in this table, the city did not have a dedicated solid waste analyst, and so we expect that with more dedicated attention to this issue, we will be able to make more progress on targets and actions within this focus area. Within the natural systems and water resources focus area, our targets focus on tree canopy. Initial results as part of the Urban Forest Management Plan development show that the city is still at 51% tree canopy. The plan, along with the Title 18 tree code, will help us identify additional opportunities for increasing our canopy. On the slide here is an image from previous studies showing potential areas to expand tree canopy in light green, which can help us achieve the 55% tree canopy cover target. And finally, as I mentioned before as well, the community resilience target is very hard to measure. That being said, staff are still implementing the actions within this focus area, such as developing a plan for a network of resilience hubs, which could better support emergency response, especially for those most vulnerable to climate emergencies in our community. Within these three focus areas, we have many areas where we can accelerate our efforts. Similar to the previous messages, we need continued investments in policies, programs, and partnerships, and services. Additionally, you will see we have identified areas of potential revisions to the Climate Action Plan in the future to make it easier to measure progress towards targets and to make sure that actions actually line up with the targets of the focus area. And with that detailed look at targets, I will turn it back to Stacy to sum up where we are and where we're headed.
Thanks, Nick and David. So we did a deep dive into our actions and targets. We're going to bring it home now with a bit of a summary of where we are headed and what our needs are. So I wanted to briefly just revisit this wedge analysis, which again is providing guidance or is a resource to us to help us set our priorities on where local action can be most impactful, and where we're headed in the next few years in terms of the work that we're implementing. Again, our work will be really focused on buildings, energy, as well as building partnerships with other departments to implement transportation investments. We'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. So what can we take away from a summary in terms of our progress on actions and targets? We are implementing actions as identified in the ICAP, where staff are really focusing our resources and capacity are on the actions that we feel have the largest impact in terms of making progress towards our targets. Our overarching greenhouse gas emissions are starting to move in the right direction, but we need to accelerate that progress. Likely, as we've mentioned a couple of times, much of the improvement that we saw in our 2022 greenhouse gas inventory was outside of local city control, but we have many actions in place that will help drive that progress. Progress towards some of our targets is not moving in the right direction. We need additional capacity and resource investment. In some cases, we may need to consider some new policies to really move the needle. Right now, we're leading with incentives and outreach, and we will continue to evaluate whether that is the most effective approach or if we need to reconsider actions and policies. And then partnerships with other jurisdictions, public agencies, and the private industry is supporting advancements in our work. We are also developing models that are being looked to regionally and nationally on areas such as residential electrification, purchasing, resilience, and unique partnerships. We're really working to be a leader in this space and partner with other jurisdictions to advance our work. In terms of where we need to go to accelerate that progress, we need to accelerate our work addressing commercial and residential building emissions. This requires further investment and expansion of our programs to support electrification, adding renewables, and increasing energy efficiency. We will do this by further pursuing funding sources, building our capacity through partnerships and consultant teams, and providing incentives and resources for the communities through new and expanded programming. We need to continue to invest in opportunities for alternatives to single occupancy vehicles and gas-powered vehicles, as well as continued advocacy for regional transit. Otherwise, transportation will continue to be a major emission contributor and may even surpass our buildings and energy. We will do this work by partnering with other city departments, including Public Works and CPD, in order to secure resources so that we can further implement projects and programs to support those departments as they build out transportation systems and regional transit. We need to continue to assess what the barriers are to implementation and identify opportunities to overcome those barriers. We are doing this through listening to our community members as well as doing local and national research so that we can develop creative solutions to barriers. And then finally, we need to continue to be a leader in this field, not only to set an example for our community, but to develop programs and projects that can be looked at as models for other jurisdictions. We will do this by continued leadership from council, support, and influence, which may include staff supporting council through helping identify legislative priorities, consideration for new or revised policies, and continued support for investment in climate action. So based on our assessment of ICAP implementation over the last 2.5 years, here are the areas that we are planning to focus as we advance implementation. We will be focusing our efforts on influencing behavior change by providing opportunities, resources, incentives, and by leading by example. This includes working with residents, businesses, property owners, and our own staff. We'll be further investing in our residential and commercial programs for building around buildings and energies. by focusing our staff capacity, building out partnerships, and continuing to pursue funding sources. As we talked about, it is challenging to measure the impact of some of our resilience measures, but we see this as one of our greatest priorities, and particularly to support our community members that might be most at risk during a climate disaster. We will continue to work with staff on enhancing our city infrastructure, projects and programs to ensure that we are building our own city resilience while also expanding programming to build the community's resilience. And finally, as we've talked a lot about tonight, partnerships are really crucial to our work. We're going to continue to build out our partnerships to expand our ICAP implementation. This is both internally with our city departments, as well as working across community organizations and other jurisdictions. So in terms of looking at the most immediate future, we are currently working on our budget request for the biennium and our investment in ICAP implementation. In the meantime, we're going to continue to advance the programs and projects focused on the areas that we just talked about a moment ago. In 2025, we will begin the process for updating the ICAP, anticipating that we will finalize ICAP adoption in summer of 2026 ahead of the next budget cycle. And then finally, just wanted to say that we greatly appreciate all the partnerships that we have with other departments, our neighboring jurisdictions, council, and the community in supporting implementation. We look forward to bringing more programs and resources to Issaquah in order to support further climate action. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, all three of you. Looking to council for questions. Councilmember Hall.
Thank you. Thank you for the super informative presentation, all three of you. Really appreciate it. I have 4 questions I didn't think of in advance, but your presentation made me think of. The first couple questions, well, you talked a lot about continuing and accelerating investment. So I have a couple questions around funding, and if you need to just say, Zach, that's going to be part of budget, that's totally fine. So one slide you had talked about grant funding. So this question's around capacity around grant funding. Is our sense that we're applying to everything that we should be? We have good capacity for applying for grants, or do we think that we're leaving some money on the table? There are some grant opportunities that we're just not able to apply for.
Yeah, great question. Thank you. I think at this time we are trying to pursue every grant opportunity. I would say state grant opportunity. We have not felt that we are necessarily competitive at the federal level for some of our programs, although that is something we're pursuing with other jurisdictions as well as other departments. I think where there is an opportunity for us to expand on grant applications is better partnerships with other departments. For instance, we're looking at a grant application for transportation programming, for instance, where we may not be the lead, but we can support the other departments.
And if I could just add a little bit on the funding, much, if not all, of the state funding that we get is from the state's Climate Commitment Act. Mm-hmm. If that is repealed, all that money goes away. And so what would you say approximately the dollar amount has been?
We have about $2.5 million, I believe, give or take, that's coming to the city for those.
So that's no small dollar amount. And so if that goes away, we would be really hard pressed to replace that. Tomorrow evening at the Mobility Infrastructure Committee, the committee is going to hear a proposal to increase the solid waste administrative fee that we have, going back up to 9%. So we anticipate that that would generate several $100,000 a year, all of which would go.
So that was my second question, was around our committee meeting tomorrow night. Is that, so going from 6% to 9% on the admin fee for solid waste contract to support climate actions, is that what we're anticipating would help meet the increased need that we have, or would that be in addition to other funding levers that we're pressing?
Yeah.
Not thinking of grants.
Yep, that we believe would meet the need over the next couple of years, likely needing to revisit it if CCA is repealed. Our hope is to pursue Climate Commitment Act funding for some of our big infrastructure projects, solar installations, EV charging. But the increase in the administrative fee would cover our general programming and some baseline large capital.
So something for the community to be aware of, that we're having that meeting tonight. Actually, speaking of waste, so you brought up waste diversion as well, and we've heard from an individual a couple times now in this space, very passionate about this space. So there's one action around requiring, future action around requiring recycling and composting, and I'm just wondering when we think might be the best and most appropriate time to start approaching that action. What have you thought about that one so far?
Yeah, great question. I would defer that to Sam Tarpon and the Public Works team. That's really under her leadership right now. I think one thing we mentioned tonight is that we are assessing kind of which policies we do want to put in place. Our approach has really been on the outreach incentive piece, but at some point that may not go far enough. So that is a conversation we want to have in consultation with Sam on the timing of that, and looking to see how the work with our zero waste specialist from Recology is rolling out, the programming that she's planning to roll out, and at what point is that not going to get us far enough where policy might need.
And let me just add a couple of words there. We are fortunate to have a very talented solid waste specialist. She's still spending a lot of her time making sure that Recology follows their contract, an unacceptable amount of time. There are some indications that they are turning a corner and that they are back to some sense of normal operations. A part of the budget discussions are what else do we need to do to manage this contract versus move forward on some of these other initiatives with solid waste. So those are discussions that we're having. We can't wait much longer. We need to free up that resource that the council so generously has provided to work on some of these ICAP projects, and not just call, why hasn't someone's garbage been picked up day after day after day. And we are, I'll say, I am, on behalf of the mayor, at the end of my rope with that. And so we are in active discussions. We will wrap these things up shortly, and as we talk about the budget in the early fall, we'll have more information at that point.
Any more questions, council members?
Just one more, if that's
Go
okay.
ahead.
And then I know there's some others. Thank you for saying that, City Administrator, too. I appreciate it. The last one was, there were a few areas, it seemed like buildings and energy, community well-being and resilience, where you'd mentioned it's difficult to track these particular metrics associated with the actions that we want or the targets that we want. I'm just curious what's to be done about that, because you've highlighted that these two in particular are really important to focus on in the coming years. Does it make sense to reevaluate how we're measuring to around these actions, or is there value in keeping it the way it is and just saying it's going to be challenging?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll speak particularly to the community resilience and well-being, where the target there is 100% of our population is served during a time of emergency. I'm paraphrasing. And in consultation with our emergency manager, that we don't currently have a way to track that. He has different metrics that are showing where we're making progress or that we're reaching members of the community that may not have been reached in the past. But right now we don't have a great metric to overall measure progress towards that target. And so I think that is a target we may revisit with the next ICAP update to see if there's something more reflective of where we want to go, or do we need to come up with a number of different metrics that will show progress towards that target. So we're doing what we can to capture where that progress is being made, but there may be some revisiting to more tie together the actions and the target in it.
And I didn't see who was up next. Is it Councilmember Hunt? Great. Does anybody else have their microphone up at this point in time? Okay, Councilmember Hunt.
Well, a version of this question, or a very similar question, was just asked, but there was the goal of making sure that our most vulnerable populations have resources in the event of climate disaster, and that they're and that is a future action. And so I wondered why the resiliency hubs aren't considered working towards that goal. It seems like an important goal, and it currently has only future actions, but we are working on these resiliency hubs. So I wanted to dig into that a little bit more.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think part of it is we may have counted kind of our work on resilience hubs under other actions and maybe not specifically tied to that particular action, but I can look back at what we're reporting in the dashboard, and if we need to kind of revisit. We have a number of different projects that I would say are helping us towards progress that we may not be reflecting very well in the progress on those actions. So we'll take a look at that again.
Okay. Yeah, I think that you mentioned the resiliency goal of 100% of the community served. That's hard to know how much progress we've made, but it seems like that's both super important that we make progress on that, and that you are actively doing projects towards that goal. So I think reconciling those things in terms of making sure the metric is reflecting the progress that you're making on those would be helpful, so that we can know how much of our, especially our most vulnerable community will be able to be served if there is a climate disaster. So that's one question, and kind of led into that comment. Sorry about that. One other thing, there was in 2023, I believe, may have been earlier, we began a program with McDonald Miller to work on clean buildings. I know that's one of the focuses going forwards, is working with our community to work on existing buildings and make them more energy efficient. So I wondered if you could give an update on that program, and if that program or similar programs is how you're going to continue to make progress in that area, or if there are additional things that we could be doing in that area.
Yeah, great question. Thank you. We started the Clean Building Incentive Program in 2022. And that program, as a refresher, is working with commercial as well as nonprofit buildings, as well as our own city buildings, both to help to get into compliance with the state's clean building performance standards, but also to help all buildings in advancing energy efficiency, electrification, and renewables. It has been slow rolling out, and we're finding this both from Department of Commerce, who manages clean building performance standards, as well as other cities that have their own incentive programs. It is taking multiple touch points with property managers or building owners to engage them in the program. However, we are starting to see an uptick in terms of participation in the program, and we have around 40 buildings that are currently enrolled in that program, and have just made some good breakthroughs with large property owners. That program has also been really beneficial in our relationship with the school district. We've supported them in doing assessments of all their buildings, which has been a part of the bond measure that they're putting out to come into compliance with the Clean Buildings Performance Standard. So happy, we provided a very brief summary of the benchmarks for that program within the detailed report included in our packet, but happy to put together a more in-depth report on the progress of that program.
Okay, I think that would be great. I think that when we first began that program, it was, it was a sort of pilot or a new program, and so getting that data back about how it's going would be beneficial if we're going to continue to do that sort of a program, and that's one of the benefits of doing it as a more like a pilot. Last question, it was mentioned a couple times that our metrics on waste, something like that our metrics on waste don't really match what we said. I don't know, something about the framing of the ICAP versus what we're measuring with waste. I also noticed that the waste is all in percentage diverted, but I wondered about how we're doing on absolute quantity, which also seems like if we're diverting more, but also making a lot more waste, that is also important to know. So I wondered if you could explain what you meant by that more, and then also address the pure quantity of waste.
Sure. Yeah, I can speak to the target. It's written two different ways in the ICAP. One way it's presented is 70% increase in waste diverted from landfills, and the other way is 70% of waste diverted from landfills. So those have very different meanings. I think we're actually very close to meeting the 70% increase. And so that's something we want to reconcile in the next version of the ICAP, where I think what was probably intended was the 70%. And then in terms of the sheer quantity, is that the other question? I'd have to go back and look at that data. We do receive monthly reports, I believe, from Recology, so we can provide that technical.
Okay, great. Yeah, that seems like that's similar to the two ways that it's measuring if you're diverting 70% or increasing the amount diverted. Also would want to know how much is just the absolute value of how much is going through.
Thank you. Any other council members with any questions? Well, wow. What a great presentation. You and your team really show your expertise and your passion about this process and this plan, and I am very, very grateful. I also want to just give you a big, big thank you for your work across departments. It's some of the best that I've seen, so I'm really excited about what you're doing and hope that Nick feels better soon. Sorry we couldn't see you tonight, Nick, so thank you very much. Oh.
Thank you.
I thought there would be a
And we're now going to go to other comments. Other comments. Okay.
Sorry, I just wanted to, on a couple of things, I wanted to follow up on Councilmember Hall's comments about multifamily diversion rates. Personally, as a multifamily resident, I was really appalled. I mean, we are failing there. And so I would really welcome the discussion about whether or not we can change city policy. It's my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's my understanding that each of the multifamily properties make their own decision about what they offer. I think we obviously need to start to standardize that and also do a lot more, require a lot more of public education on how to do it. I think, at least in my complex, a lot of people don't even understand how it is done or how it should be done. And I just see a lot of things being thrown into recycling that shouldn't be in recycling. And so anyway, I personally, I'm just speaking for myself, but I would welcome a discussion about what kind of policy we might want to adopt that we think would be effective in raising the rates. I believe in Issaquah that we have somewhere between 43 and 49% of our residences are multifamily. We have a large percentage, so that would be a huge change if we can start to get those rates up. So just wanted to say that I would welcome that discussion. On the transportation, you know, I've been a long time advocate for transportation demand management. And so I will just say, and I realize that we're going to have a really tough budget discussion this year. There's a lot of people saying we need more people or we need more capacity. But I just want to put that out there. When we're talking about partnerships, there is an organization, and again, if you've already done this, just correct me and let me know. But there is an organization in Seattle called Transportation Choices that is a private organization, but their job is encouraging people to take transit. There was at one point a chapter of Transportation Choices here on the east side, and I was active in that group at that time. It's since gone defunct. I'm just wondering, when we're reaching out and looking for partners, if we might not talk to Transportation Choices and see if they could come and talk to us about how we can energize our community, maybe get a grassroots efforts going. I know we have a few, like Dave Wagner at the Senior Center, does those beautiful bus, you know, tours and encourages senior citizens to ride the bus. But we need to do more to get people out of their cars, onto transit, using transit. And I've been personally encouraged by what Metro's doing in the area of safety and cleanliness on their buses. They are really putting a focus on that right now. So I think this is a good time for us to start to promote using transit as an alternative to single occupancy vehicles. So that would just be a suggestion that I think we ought to follow up on and see how we can just energized that whole idea of get on the bus, get out of your car, get on the bus. So those are my comments. Thank you very much, and it was a great presentation.
Councilmember Hunt.
Thank you. Yes, this represents a lot of hard work and a lot of success, and that is great. And it's a very important milestone because this is the first ever ICAP, and this is the first major check-in. So firstly, just, thank you so much for all of your work and all of the community members' work that are holding us accountable to making progress on this. One of the things that was mentioned, but just bears repeating, is the Clean Energy Transformation Act. The CETA is not going to continue to provide us with this downward trajectory. So even when we assume our current trajectory, that won't allow us to hit our target. That also assumes that we will be making up that difference with local actions, which is different than what we've been able to achieve so far. So even achieving that current trajectory will be requiring additional local action. So lots more creativity there, but I think that's important to point out. Some of the other things that I just wanted to mention, Metroflex, I think, has been very successful. I agree with Councilmember DeMichelle. I recently took the bus into Seattle. It's very clean, and we should definitely be encouraging that, and it was great. Didn't have to look for parking in Seattle. So I think we should definitely be encouraging that, but I also think Metroflex has been very successful. We recently saw that data back about the large uptick in use now that it's kind of catching on and people know about it and are able to use it. So wanted to make another mention of the Highlands as a community that could really benefit from this, and continued advocacy to Metro for expanding our service area to include the Highlands. And I also do this on behalf of Council President Walsh, who I know would want to make sure that we mentioned that, because I do think that's important for our whole community to be able to take advantage of that. And it's one of our more successful, I think, efforts to get people out of the traditional single occupancy vehicle trips. We are tomorrow talking about Title 18 amendments. These are mostly things that have come up over the course of this last year, where implementation needs to be adjusted. But I think we can also take into account the impact that Title 18, those changes, has on the climate and on our ability to achieve these goals while we're doing that review. So I will be keeping that in mind. And then lastly, the climate resiliency, and especially the resiliency for vulnerable populations, is something that I think is really important. So I know it's on your to-do list to look at that metric and make sure we have a metric we can actually track. But I think that's super important. We've just been having recently a lot more conversations about evacuation routes for wildfires, and we're at increased wildfire risk relative to where we were, even when I started on council. So I think that's really important that we make sure that we're tracking progress on that in a meaningful way, and also making meaningful progress on that, which I believe you are doing. It's just that the metric isn't quite matching up. So that's one area that I would really encourage a quick update so we can make sure that we're tracking that. Thank you again.
Thank you, Councilmember Hunt. Any other council members? Great. Councilmember Hunt made a good point that I forgot to make in thanking you, and that is your use of data. The city has really, really, really embraced data in all of our operations, but in your work in particular, it really shows. So thank you very much for doing that. That's great. Okay. Any more comments? Great. Well, thank you. Thank you to the whole team. The next informational item is ID 1747. It is an update from the 2023 Issaquah Police Department year-end report. And I'd like to invite the chief up to the podium. Just handing a few items out in the chamber before we start. Thank you, Chief. I don't think your microphone's on yet. Thank you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Excellent. While Ryan's getting started, passing those out, you all got a lot in your packet, but as well as just providing you sunscreen that we are giving out to our staff to make sure that in this hot sun we're staying protected. Thank you for having us this evening. I'm going to give an update regarding the 2023 activities and the crime stats for the police department specifically. The data presented in this update presentation is available in the Issaquah Police Department's 2023 annual report, which will be available on our website. This document gives data closing out 2023, but if you or the public are interested in more recent data, we include much of this in the monthly reports, which are updated on our website as well. That's the other single sheet that Ryan is also handing out as well.
Thanks.
Going over some overall crime trends. Overall crime was relatively low in the city of Issaquah in 2023 with roughly 74.5 crimes per 1,000 population and a 7.2% decrease in total crime incidents from the previous year. Majority of our crimes comes from property, with nearly 66% of all crime in the city of Issaquah falling into the crimes against property category, with 1,932 incidents out of the total 2,932 incidents being property crimes. When we compare these crime categories over the last few years, for the first time in over 4 years, and the first time in this decade, the number of property crimes has begun to reverse in trend with a 14.6% decrease compared to our peak estimates in 2022. However, while there have been success in addressing property crimes, there were slight increases in both crimes against person and against society, specifically those regarding aggravated assaults, weapon offenses, vandalism, and graffiti. Thus far in 2014, property crimes still hold the majority share of crimes in Issaquah. However, property crimes are still decreasing. We believe this is in part related to the increased partnerships with local businesses and our increased directed patrol missions. In response to the increase last year in crimes against society and persons, we have been working to get more officers on the road and visible in the community to act as a deterrent in some of the crimes where we have been seeing increases. So really dedicating some of those, and some of those are even in our retail areas, doing blitzes and such with those businesses. Part of this is thanks to our increase in staffing levels, which allows us to take more calls and respond to more calls in a faster fashion. I'll briefly touch base on updates in each division within the police department, and I'm going to start with the data division of dispatch themselves. Our dispatch center is an incredibly busy place where our 12 dispatchers and dispatch supervisor field emergency and non-emergency calls for 3 jurisdictions. In 2023, there were 55,707 total calls for service in the Issaquah Dispatch Center. Just over 35,000 of those calls, or 63%, were for the Issaquah residents alone. By emergency status, 77% of the calls were classified as not emergency status in 2023, with approximately 43,000 calls to the dispatch center. 2024 year to date, 20,000 calls for service as of May, comparable to prior last year's. Our dispatch also processes warrants, protection orders, and runs continuous research for officers in the field. Our dispatchers processed 2,346 warrants last year, each of which takes anywhere from 5 to 20 minutes of time for every single warrant, plus additional review and validation time, because everyone that's entered has to be reviewed by a second dispatcher to make sure all the information is completely accurate. 323 protection orders were also processed, and there were nearly 419,000 research inquiries made on behalf of officers in the field, on calls for all 3 jurisdictions, totaling roughly 1,147 inquiries per day processed in our dispatch center. As for our men and women on patrol, they work hard to answer every call quickly. It is common practice for police departments to classify calls based on priority levels. All calls are responded to, but not all of them require the same type of response, if that makes sense. If we look at all calls, it took roughly 15 minutes to respond, but those are not all emergency calls. In 2023, IPD's average response time for a priority 1 emergency call was 3 minutes and 12 seconds. In 2024, year to date, the average response time for priority 1 call is approximately 3 minutes exactly. As Issaquah's population increases and more pedestrians, bikes, scooters, and vehicles join the roads and sidewalks, our traffic team is a vital tool to ensuring everyone moves safely through the city. In 2023, officers responded to 255 reported accidents that required police intervention or assistance and tended to 1,946 traffic violations. Also important to note, not all reports for service come via a call into our dispatch center. In 2023, there were over 703 online reports. This is, This is an increase of 12.4% from the prior year. Each one of those reports and the investigation and documentation for each are all conducted by one officer alone, and that's Officer John Lindner. He fields not only the online reports, but also all in-person reports, phone reports to the station as well. He often handles when he's on duty, and he handles all the speed camera violations that we get in our city. Moving to investigations. Our detectives conduct a broad spectrum of criminal investigations, which include robberies, burglaries, assaults, fraud, computer crimes, death investigations, sexual assaults, missing persons, among other types of crimes. In 2023, there were nearly 300 cases handled by our 2 detectives and 1 sergeant who was there half the year before retiring. The rest of the year was entirely responded to and handled by our lone 2 detectives. In the same year, we brought on a new detective sergeant, Huberto, to lead the team, who started in January 2024. There was a 2% point increase in the case closure rate compared to 2022, but a 31.5% increase in the actual cases in 2023. Thus far, year to date in 2024, there have been 178 cases under investigation by detectives, setting us up for an estimated near 20% increase by the end of the year. With the increases in cases for the 2 detectives, they've done extremely well by leveraging resources and partnering agencies to maintain comparable case closure estimates thus far. Moving on to records. That's a lot of information. Do you want me to take a break and ask some questions opportunity before I continue?
Let's go to Councilmember Hunt. Oh, was it Hall first? Sorry. Councilmember Hall, followed by Councilmember Martz, and then Deputy Council President.
Thank you. 2 slides previous where you talk about the average response time. I just want to take a second to acknowledge the significance of this. I mean, what's the secret sauce? How did you get it down? So it's 3 minutes now, year to date 2024. Is that what you're saying? I'm just curious what you're attributing that to, or what we can take away as policymakers from that. What is leading to a decreased response time?
For me, I would say that's probably the officers actually on the street, that we actually have more, so they're covering the different districts. So if a call for service is emergent, we have an officer already there versus having to come across town. And that would, I would say, the biggest thing is to be the increase in our numbers for keeping those numbers down as far as that response, because that's from the call time we get the call to where an officer is actually on scene. Now, that doesn't mean those other officers that are still coming to assist don't take a little longer, but that's a person on scene, and I would attribute that to staffing. Great question.
Martz.
Thank you. Chief, when you say that crime is low, do we have the ability to compare our crime rates, both property and personal crime, to Kirkland, Redmond, Bothell, other comparable cities on the east side?
Yes, we do. We do have that option. I don't have that data at my fingertips right now, but we do have that option. and ability that I can get for you, and we can report back for sure.
Would love to know that also, that I love that 96% closure rate for investigations by our detectives. Wondering how that also, compares to other municipalities. That as well.
Sure.
Thank you.
Deputy Council President?
This is a 101 question, but when I was reading the report, how does somebody become a detective, and do they rotate, or are we, once they're designated as a detective, is that a designation that they carry forward, or how does that whole process work?
Excellent question. It's different for different agencies. So for our department specifically, you show an interest, and then we do a testing process. You have to have been on the department for more than 3 years and establish yourself as a police officer and your investigative regular police activity skills, and going out, and you're kind of detective in and of itself when you're responding to calls, but to do that as your specialty assignments. And all our detectives are on different task forces. For example, one of our detectives gets a lot of extra training, and she's on the Major Crimes Task Force, which is a collective of all the small cities. And then we have the other detective, he's on our IFIT team. So he's an investigator for the IFIT, which they have a complete requirement on the different trainings that you're required to have before you can be a lead investigator for that IFIT program as well. And so that's when an instant, for example, a couple incidents we had in our jail, that we have other teams come and they have to do those investigations. And so we collaborate with other agencies, but it's a mass amount of education they get and training to be a detective. Per your question, as far as the part for rotation and how long you stay, some agencies have it to where some are a designated civil service spot to where you're in that position or you have that option. So, or one or more positions can be in a detective's area for permanency once you get into that role. Others that you don't. And so for ours, it's that you can be in that role for up to 3 years with 2 one-year extensions is how it reads in our policy currently, because you like that option to have people to be able to stay in there because they have that experience, but you also want to be able to grow all your staff that way that are interested in those processes and growing of their education and being a police officer down the road. Yep.
Nobody else with the microphone up? Oh, Councilmember Joe.
Thank you, Chief, for coming to the meeting to give a presentation. I'd like to ask about retail theft a little bit. The mayor was kind enough to come to our Rotary Club and give us a State of the City address last Tuesday. I appreciate that. Thank you. She did mention that retail theft continues to be a challenge. I know that we have the Retail Loss Prevention Business Group that we work with. Can you give a little more information about the steps we're taking to try to address that here in Issaquah?
Thank you for the question. We have multiple different things. Several of our staff, including Brian Smith, and some other staff that attend those meetings for the retail theft group on a regular basis, do presentations. We bring in other people as well to speak on behalf of different pieces like the prosecutors and people, so they know what we're looking for when we are prosecuting those cases. They've wanted to be in a collaboration with having some blitzes. In other words, we have a consolidated effort, and sometimes they're doing them individually by the businesses. Sometimes they're doing them as a collective, like 3 businesses all together will want to do one in the same day. And as being a part of that, we've tried to instill the fact that if they need to work with us on a regular basis for us to want to collaborate and do a blitz. So in other words, if they're not reporting anything or being cooperative in when they have or finding that they're having theft, and they have those individuals that are being stopped or contacted, and they're not, or they're calling us, and then they're not doing anything as reports. They're much more reporting those instances as they come in, or they'll do their own investigative work and then report it online. So then that's what's also increasing John Linder and the station officer and having those reports. So I think that's a big piece. Our presence, our officers are out there regularly, and they're doing many go-abouts through, and that's when the staff at those businesses know that we're there and in the area. That also is increasing our response time because we're on site and know that that's where things are happening at on a regular basis. So we're a little bit closer in that perspective.
Thank you, Chief. When you say blitzes, could you explain that a little bit more for the viewing public? I think of 7 rushers going after a quarterback, but that's probably not what we're talking about here.
That's correct. It is not what the quarterback situation is. A blitz is when we have people that might be undercover in a specific location. They have a lot of loss prevention on staff, so they're really looking out for those individuals that are partaking in illegal activities inside the store. And so the minute that takes place, we have staff that are designated to that specific store for that period of time. We also have a dispatcher, and we also have a corrections officer for transport. So it goes very quickly, and when one happens, then we still have an officer on site designated for that. That's what a blitz means, is that we have one day that's designated with a lot of loss prevention, a lot of officers, but you don't know they're there. The public won't see that. It's more for those that are committing nefarious activities.
And I know it's hard to measure, the data is probably a little sketchy, but anecdotally, have we seen a reduction in crime at those businesses where blitzes were conducted, and has it had an effect over a time period of 3 months, a week, a year? What's kind of been the experience we've had after doing blitzes?
I don't have exact data, to be fair, but I would say it would, for at least for a couple of months, because people know that they're happening. It does deter people when they know. The word does get out. And so it has been a deterrent. So they're nice to happen more throughout the year instead of just at one time. And so, but the businesses, because of the retail business groups, have been increasing those throughout the years as well. So it's been helpful, and it's nice that we stagger them. It's not just the one location that's having them done.
Thank you, Chief. I appreciate your answers. Thanks for coming tonight.
Sure.
Any other comments or questions, or keep going? Keep going. Chief?
I think we finished. We're moving on. There we go. Thank you. So our records team also had a busy 2023. The 4 records staff, now we have 5 in 2024, thankfully, are responsible for all phone public records requests or police record requests. Ensuing, the public receives timely copies of case reports, 911 audio files, photographs, etc. But they are also responsible for processing all case reports and parking citations, as well as reviewing and processing the hundreds and hundreds of hours of body cam footage each day now. In 2023, there were nearly 1,300 public records requests for the police department itself, requiring countless hours of review and processing. The records team also processed 292 concealed pistol licenses and 656 gun purchase and transfers. There was a 9% increase in public records requests processed in 2023 compared to prior year, while CPL applications remained stable over the years. Moving on to corrections. The Issaquah City Jail contracts services for over 14 other jurisdictions in the area. In 2023, there were 1,611 total inmates in the city jail for Issaquah. With an average daily inmate population of at least 53.9 inmates, there were many days with near 60 or over inmates. This is a 15% increase in the number of inmates cared for from 2022. We are on track to have comparable estimates in 2024. Of these 1,611 inmates, roughly 77% were male, 23% were female. These proportions are in line with other correctional facilities and our population proportions the prior year. Well, all of our officers go above and beyond for our community. Several of other officers several of our members received awards and recognition for their efforts. There are numerous memorandums of appreciation and several commendations for continued service issued to various officers and civilian staff members. There were also a few awards of distinction that should be highlighted. Life-saving awards. On 3 separate occasions in 2023, correctional officers Alan Hensley, Michael Watson, which is now Corporal Michael Watson, and Michael Zuppi were alerted to a life-threatening situation where an inmate was found to their dorm lying unconscious and unresponsive. After checking for pulses and observing their symptoms present, the officers swiftly called for aid and administered Narcan. The inmate responded and were subsequently transported to the hospital for treatment to Narcan and made full recovery. The quick and decisive actions of the officers saved the inmates' lives. Meritorious Service Award. In 2023, Sergeant Asbell was awarded the Meritorious Service Award in recognition of her commitment and dedication to the department. In 2023, Sergeant Asbell took on the lead of the peer support team and organized the very regional event centered around first responder health and well-being for our department and surrounding agencies. She also took a leadership role in the annual Salmon Days event and the Peace Earn Radio project, which was a huge undertaking, while assisting our field training program and maintaining daily patrol duties. Moving forward into 2024. There have been many new things happening this year at IPD. We got one of our new vehicles, and the inclusion of the body cameras has greatly contributed to the increase in case closures for investigations. This adoption of these technologies has only improved the service we provide to the public. As we continue to move forward, we are focusing on filling the positions, which we are almost fully staffed, with over 200 hours of chief's interviews since November 9 of 21. Obviously not that many hires, but moving through the process and getting the best people possible for our department. We have successfully hired several officers, both for patrol and corrections, which has been a tremendous effort, both on our staff for all the stuff that it takes to get those people hired, every single one of them, even just to go through the background process. We have increasing directed patrol missions in community business regions to target shoplifted related crimes and in residential areas. And end of 24, begin reopening of various community-oriented specialty programs and assignments to be our CRO, the traffic, and possibly another detective with our 20% increase in cases for load. I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Thank you for that detailed report. Questions? Councilmember Joe.
Thank you. I see on page 20, there's a picture of the National Night Out event, and that's going to be in August. Can you tell us a little bit more about the date and what citizens can expect to see that evening?
I don't have the same pages that you have, so I don't know what page 20 is, but I can speak that, yes, we are actually coming to you guys on July 22nd is going to be the Proclamation for National Night Out. It is going to be happening again this year, where we have several council members that I think will be responding and going to several of those events, as well as we're also going to have the event that we normally have out on the back of City Hall. And so it's going to be another great event that we're going to have different resources out there, and Target's going to be another great member with us, having games as well and participating with us this year.
And Chief, thanks for the facts there. Give me the facts and only the facts, please. What kind of benefits do we see for the community in terms of collaboration with our police officers and our other city staff when we hold these events?
The biggest part is awareness and availability for them to be able to ask questions. This is a National Night is intended for it to be a collaboration and working together to basically collaborate against crime. And so give them resources, tell them about 911, educate kids about 911 and different avenues of the police department, whether it be the corrections, whether it be the jail, whether it be dispatch center, so they know when they call 911 what that looks like, what they can expect when an officer responds. So that's the biggest part, and to have them be able to have a conversation. So our officers go out into those communities that are having them. They have the opportunity for, if they don't want to necessarily talk to the police officer, they know that they're there and available. And that's the other part. It gets us out in a more unofficial setting for them to be able to communicate and have conversation, and realize also that the officers are people as well as not just a uniform.
Thank you, Chief. I appreciate the efforts that your department's making to do community policing and to make sure that people in our community see police as a friend that can help and assist in an emergency, and not necessarily someone to be concerned about or fear. I think Councilmember Ray talked about warriors versus guardians, or warriors versus guardians, and I appreciate the balance that your department is bringing to that equation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Hunt.
Thank you for the information and for the report. Several years ago, we had an action plan, and one of the actions there was a monthly report that would be available on the website with crime data, so more regular data available for people to know what trends are happening and what's happening in different neighborhoods. So I wondered what's the status of the online reports on crimes that community members can access through our website.
Yep. Thank you. The online reporting is available. There was a glitch with our radar program, which was in connection with that for a short period. But Ryan actually is the one who puts all our stuff on the website and works with communications on making sure that it's up there and updated regularly. As far as they're also looking at some new programs. Did you want to speak to that at all? As far as looking at some data, we're looking at some new innovative ways for it to be more user-friendly for you guys to be able to, and the public to be able to help find those pieces of information. But as of right now, it is on there regularly as a monthly basis. The following month, we try and put that out for the one prior, so people can go research and find that data. And that's part of that for, I think, the single sheet that was also listed out. And we can put that on the website as well for people to, if they're not aware that where to find that out, but it is on our website.
Councilmember Martz.
Thanks. Chief, one way to think about the IPD that isn't really touched on in this report so much is around the staffing side, right? We all know that the IPD went through a low point in staffing a while back and has been working its way back up. But I know that, and some of these things aren't really potential council action items, because some of it is collective bargaining and all that kind of stuff. But can you talk a little bit towards the staffing side of things and the trend that you see for the IPD? I know that you've got a lot of folks that have been going through the academy, bringing folks in from the academy, investing in our trainer program to help bring those candidates to make them successful in the IPD. Is there much that you can say about that side of it? Because I think that's an important aspect. And certainly when you talk about being able to respond in 3.2 minutes and then bring it down to 3 minutes, staffing is a big part of that, the secret sauce for that.
Sure, thank you. So in November of 21, we were down a third of our staff. We were down 27, and that's over the whole department. That's not just in patrol, just to be clear. And so we were down 27 people and staff members. And so over the last almost 3 years now, I can't believe I'm saying that. It's almost 3 years. It's been a lot of interviews, a lot of backgrounds, but it used to be many years ago when I started in law enforcement, there was, 1,500 people applying for 10 positions. And now that's not the case anymore. Now it's the case where you have, you were lucky to get a full day of interviews. And then it's about viable people because of pasts, because of history, because of choices, because of a good fit. And so it's a long process, and that's for every division, because everybody in the police department goes through the same background process. So it's a lot of effort and a lot of energy. And then for an officer specifically, once they get hired on and they're here on our staff, they go through rigorous training. It takes 9 months to get someone that's brand new. We've been very fortunate to get many officers that are laterals, which I've been very thankful for, and thankful to the council for being supportive in having that as well. One of the other pieces that's a huge part of it is our FTO program. They spend countless hours.
FTO
is field training. Thank you. Field training officers. So our FTOs we only have 5 currently in our program, because as you promote and you get to a sergeant, you're no longer a field training officer. So we lose them as we promote them, and then we try and get new. But losing and having very young staff as well, we're needing to grow some of those FTOs. So those field training officers, they spent countless hours, because the field training program is a minimum of 14 weeks. So that means they spend a month with one FTO. So that's a month. Every shift you came to work, imagine you had basically someone that you were teaching to do your job every day for a month. And then you get another one, and then you get another one. And so that's a lot. That's very difficult on our staff. And so I can't commend them enough for all the time, effort, and energy and hours they put in on a regular basis to train the people in the staff. And they have to be innovative, because not everybody learns the same way. So I want our people to be successful, and we put a lot of time, effort, and money into them being trained and get through the academy. And after they've gone through the academy, then they get to us at the police department, and then we have to train them. And that's the same for dispatch, because not everybody can do these jobs. they're not easy. And some people, you're either drawn to, what's going on, or you want to stand back and not be involved. And so it takes a different kind of person and being able to do that. So the field training officers, can't thank them enough for all they've put in time and all the new staff that we have over the last 3 years. And they're still doing it. It's fighting the good fight. So,
Any other questions? How about comments? Okay. Well, Chief and Ryan, thank you very much. I just wanted to say that I'm shocked it's 3 years as well, but so grateful for your focus on not only hiring quality staff, but also looking internally and promoting some of our wonderful internal employees that we have. And so I've been honored to be able to do the swearing in and getting people promoted into their new positions. So thank you for that. A comment on the report was that the graphics and the photos are great, and Mayor Butler will definitely be getting my copy. He's a good friend of mine, and Councilmember Hall might want you to sign that last page where he's there giving Ryan an award. But this is great, and the online reports are great. You've also brought a lot of data analysis to this council, which is just fantastic. Not just reporting on the numbers of crimes, but a whole bunch of information, and we really, really appreciate your team for that.
well, huge thank you to Ryan. Ryan's the one that put this report together, and she's done an amazing job. And she's super helpful to the staff on just even where we're getting trends, and push them out bulletins on people to look for and what she's seeing, because she collaborates with other cities and their crime analysts as well. And so It's been a just amazing effort and help. Thank you.
And making sure that the council's not getting sunburned, which is very, very important. Thank you.
And then we'll get back to you with the data from the other agencies as well.
Great. So thank you very much for that. We're going to go to good of the order. And I have a couple of meeting notices, but who has something for good of the order tonight? Councilmember Joe.
Just quickly, a reminder, the Port of Seattle Port Unplugged event is the 17th. It's in Issaquah this year at Pickering Barn. If you haven't registered, please do so. And that should be a fun evening. Thank you.
Any other announcements for good of the order? I'll go through a couple of upcoming meetings. July 15th is the Committee of the Whole meeting. The meeting has a special start time and location. It'll begin at 5:30 p.m. at the King County District Court in Issaquah, which is at 5415 220th Avenue Southeast. The meeting will include a tour of King County District Court, Fire Station 72, and the Redmond Police Department. Box dinner will be provided on the van. July 16th, Committee of the Whole meeting at the normal time and location, 6:30 p.m. in Council Chambers. The agenda items include strategic plan update, task force report out. Well, that's a good one. Facilities and revenue options. And then the next regular City Council meeting will be July 22nd. There's no executive session this evening, and there being no further business, this meeting is adjourned at 9:23. Thank you.